So, why knowing your partners can support the community? Tammy talked about our dirty dozen. We're going to call the foursome dirty dozen up here. We all have our dirty dozens in each of us, right? So, the purpose of this panel was to really talk about how we can impact each other. We have Sarah GoldFrank to my left, who sits on our NDLC. She's a Senior Vice President, Deputy General Counsel at Fannie Mae. She says, that's right. What do you want me to talk about? I can talk about all these different parts within Fannie Mae. I'll figure it out. How many times do you email and call me? A dozen? I'm like, chill, it's okay, it's okay. But that's how responsible she feels and is to her craft, to her industry, in her persona of what she wants to bring to this panel. How incredible, right? She's like, okay, thanks. Then next is Alex. He wants to bring in the impact of, his law firm in Florida. And when he saw this is about women and the impact of his firm and where he lives in one of the top states for sexual exploitation and trafficking and all this stuff, he said, that's great, I gotta be there, I gotta be on that panel. And then we have Mark, sorry, stepping in for John from the SBA, who's gonna talk about financial access and the aspirations of what SBA does on a lot of different levels. So am I right about what I just said about the SBA and national trade, right? We have it on? We have a panel.
Yeah, it's on now. Okay. We're definitely into all of that. International trade as well as doing domestic programs here, helping in underserved communities, of which Fannie Mae obviously talked about going in. And then I heard a little something about hub zones yesterday and a few things that help people in with affordable housing and other programs.
Yeah, people don't think about SBA as this almighty, your money, taxes, I paid for them. Get your money's worth. Get it back, your ROI, right?
And because we're still subsidizing, we don't have to raid the treasury. We gotta pay back the lumber or something like that.
So we're gonna go down the line. I'm gonna go have Sarah introduce herself, and some of the resources and impact is what we have as for women entrepreneurs and business owners and what Fannie Mae's doing now.
Sure, so thank you, Desiree, for the kind words, and I'm thrilled to be here. As Desiree mentioned, I am the Deputy General Counsel at Fannie Mae. My focus is on the single-family mortgage business. And in terms of Fannie Mae, is this where I'm going to go into my short spiel? Okay. My short spiel. I wanted to focus on three things and really tie it into other focuses that have been mentioned, so beginning with Tammy this morning. In financial services, we talk about knowing your customer, KYC. And it seems as if one of the themes of this conference is to know your stuff. And so I feel like it's KYS. I feel like it's know your stuff. And so I want to focus on three things that I want you to know about Fannie Mae, about the focus that I see in terms of the market moving. One is the market outlook. The second is some of the work we're doing in the single-family space. And the third is what I think is really a watershed event in terms of the legal community, and it impacts all of us, I believe. So first, in terms of the economy, I don't think it comes as any surprise to you, but when you look across the horizon for the balance of this year and likely into next year, we're going to continue to see the refinances going down, primary mortgage go up, and as you know, supply is a real big issue, including particularly in the affordable space, which means that home prices are likely to just continue to go up. So that impacts day-to-day, particularly for all of us in the mortgage business, but you also have to think about the long-term business plan. Because that means that it's becoming more expensive to do business because there are less customers. It's true primary mortgage is growing, but overall, the lending is shrinking because there's just less people out there in the market. And that means you have to figure out a way to do it cheaper and better. And so there's likely in your companies, as well as this particularly true of the large lenders, they're investing in customer service and technology, and particularly the way that those two things tie together. But they might be reducing investment in other spaces. And so you need to be thinking about how does that play out for you in terms of the work you're doing and the larger companies that you may or may not be working with. So that's the market outlook. Second, in terms of what we're focused on, two of our biggest focuses are affordable housing and technology advancements. And so we're doing everything from, we have our own 3% down program called Home Ready. We're also looking at how the gig economy and income derived from gig jobs impact underwriting, as well as how to use data validation services to underwrite loans. That's something that we kicked off more than a year ago. And we're also looking at how, for example, Airbnb income can be used in the refinance space and probably later in the purchase money space. And how households that may not be traditional can use multiple sources of income to underwrite a loan. These are all areas that we have a huge focus in terms of knowing your stuff. Our website has so much information out there in terms of how you can be involved, what we're up to, what we're thinking about doing. We hold a lot of roundtables, and we're looking to discover more opportunities for us and really for the communities. And so I encourage you to know your stuff and go to our website and check out what we're doing, both in the single-family space where I spend most of my time, as well as the multifamily space. Last but not least, there really is a watershed event in terms of the legal landscape, and that's in the privacy space. So how many people know about the California Consumer Privacy Act? Raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5. And on the panel. That's it. So you probably heard about the GDPR, which is the EU's version of the privacy law. But just last month, California passed a privacy law, which we expect to see copycatted in other states across the country, and probably in the future we'll have a federal law. But it requires businesses, and I'll get a footnote there, requires businesses to be able to respond to customers, vendors, counterparties, people who visit their website with what information you have on them, what you do with that information, whether you sell it, and you might have to delete information about them if they ask you to, depending on your relationship with them. You have to respond in a short period of time. There's private rights of actions, as well as the California Attorney General can sue you if they find that you violate this act. There is a year and a half to get ready, but you have to think about how does this impact you. You might say, but wait, I'm a small business. Why does this impact me? It's true. If you're a small business, you're exempt from the law. It doesn't mean you won't get questions, though, from consumers. They might not read the fine print, so they might still approach you and ask you questions about what you're doing with their data and what data you have, and whether the law applies to you directly or not. You have to think about, how will I respond to them? These are people I have a relationship with. What does it mean if I respond to them and just say, this law doesn't apply to me, thank you for your inquiry? Or are you going to respond, do you want to respond another way and say, the law doesn't apply to us, but just so you know, here's what we do. That means you have to set up a whole system to respond to these inquiries. And of course, if you're working with larger companies, or if you are part of a large company, you have to think about, how do we respond to inquiries, and how do we work with our smaller partners to make sure that collectively we're compliant with the law? So I have to say, because Desiree asked me about the legal landscape, and I said, I just want to focus on one thing, and it's the California Consumer Privacy Law, because I will tell you, it is a big deal. Unless you've already complied with GDPR because of your EU interactions, this is a huge event in terms of your interactions with consumers and with regulators. So I encourage you to learn more about that and know your stuff.
Can we steal know your stuff or quote you on that?
You can quote me on it. How about that? You can't steal it because I'm going to trademark it.
and then from there, we got Chicha. How many things you need to sign now before you leave, this afternoon? I mean, whoa! And we were just talking at Locally with Rebecca and everything about the depositories and having all the data in there, and who we want to take on that responsibility, the liability that goes with the privacy, that we can all put in the center of our ecosystem and derive and pull from that.
Yeah, I think it's really this sort of this strange intersection. There's so much focus on things like blockchain, which is really sharing information across platforms. And then things like the privacy laws or privacy expectations are almost this whole other side of the coin. And you have to figure out, how do you balance those two in terms of what is people's expectations, what are the requirements of the law, and how do we push the economy forward? It's a very gnarly space. We haven't figured it out, but I think it's a really exciting opportunity too. But I would say, if you think about knowing your stuff, how often do people just click on the I accept terms and conditions without reading them? Right? I think you think about people click away their rights rights every day. And I think it's a really important thing for you, again, especially as business owners and entrepreneurs, to think about how are you interacting with your consumers and making sure that they're making conscious decisions about their interactions with you.
Facebook right now, you don't have an app off your phone saying that they can't take you, even if your phone's off. They can send you ads that hear you with your camera and your voice. Every one of you have Facebook on your phone, unless you physically went into the special setting to take it off and they don't tell you about it. Can record and have your camera on and hear you speak. Oh dear, Jay, I'd like to go to Greece tomorrow. You'll get an ad on Greece on your phone immediately. Think about that. Checho, you got Monday and we'll talk. Alex, go ahead. It's your forum.
Fantastic. This one's got a little bit of a delay. So, first of all, I think it takes a confident man to come in and sit down in front of an entire room filled with nothing but women and somehow feel like I am somehow capable of talking about how things impact women. But I will say there was no fun facts portion for what we're doing here, but I do have two daughters that are 10 and 8. I have a wife. 75% of my team, I don't call them my employees, are women. And I live in Miami with both of my parents are Cuban immigrants. Both of them having coming over in the late 1950s, and in my father's case, having come over through an operation called Peter Pan that was bringing over Catholic children through the Archdiocese of Cuba. He was his parents for 5 years. So I give you a little bit of the background on that because I think there is a need for all of us as we're discussing to talk about perspectives, to talk about the opportunities that we receive in order to be able to properly talk about partnerships, for examples. I think that maybe instead of knowing your partners, the title of this probably should be knowing your partnerships. And that's a reality. As Desiree said with respect to my wanting to be on the panel, I did feel that with respect to women in the industry, raising two women, or let's call them girls for right now, 10 and 8, but raising two young girls that I'm teaching them that they can do anything. That is a reality with respect to the community, especially where I live. So I live in Miami. That is, the Miami Association of Realtors is the largest association of realtors in the United States. That is a local resource. So we're talking about resources that are available for you, for women in particular. I don't think that there's a blanket answer other than this one. I don't think that there's a blanket answer for that because every local community in which each of you operates has different avenues available for you that start at obviously a national level and then work their way down to opportunities that present themselves at a local level. We are changing as a society when it comes to real estate in ways and at speeds that are previously unfathomable and unknown. For those of you in the real estate industry, we're talking about partnerships and knowing things. When I was, let's go back 20 years ago, there was everybody that wanted to sell a home found a realtor. That's not the case anymore. People either try to sell it first, put it online, or get somebody to maybe offer them 1.5%, or you have all the startups coming up now that are charging flat fees. That's knowing your industry, that's knowing your partnerships, and knowing the disruptors that are coming into the industry that are affecting men and women alike. Women at this point in time, there are a lot of changes that are actually been beneficial. I think when you just look at it with some perspective over the last 50 years and then looking forward to how quickly things can accelerate over the next 10 to 15, the legal landscape is very different now. Lawyers in real estate transactions, for example, and know your partnerships, a lot of it is about helping to assist and finalize the closings, and obviously helping to assist with respect to the title insurance that always accompanies that. Well, guess what? It was not that long ago, a decade ago, where if you had, whether it's you or whether it's somebody else, and you had to have your vendors set up on the real estate side in every industry on a statewide level. But now the internet, the ability to have abstracts, examinations, and things with technology that now allows a firm like mine in Miami to handle all 67 counties, or that's great. I can now help, but I can't compete with the company that now has 100 people working in a warehouse in Kansas and does 30 states because they have the technology to be able to offer services to national providers. where 30 Almazan laws or 30 of any one of your businesses can potentially be consumed by the reality that it is a large business at discounted services that can compete with you in ways that you cannot. So how do you make that better? How do you fix that? How do you compete with that? I think that's really, for me, is the essence of what I thought this panel was about, which was the opportunity to tell you it is relationships and it is partnerships. And above anything else, I don't believe there is anything that is better suited for how a women-owned business in particular can move forward than to establish and to grow those relationships, not forced but organically. I think we run into a situation now with millennials as we're getting older. Millennials are twice as likely to have twice as many jobs in the first decade out of college than we were when we were growing up. Moms and dads, they worked for 20 years at the same job. They had pensions. There are no pensions anymore. It's now 401ks. There is a difference in the society and the people in which we are around that we are working with when we're starting businesses that is different. It's no longer solely about how much you pay and what you're going to be able to retire within 25 years. People want quality of life. You have to have partnership levels with your legal community, with the financial support, with everything that you do, that frankly, I think it's a matter of individual taste. Everybody here is growing their business in their own way. And you have opportunities and avenues available for you and what you can do. But for example, knowing your lawyer is just as important as knowing who your banker is. Knowing at a local level when you get down, and I know U.S. Bank is one of the sponsors, and obviously it's a large national bank, but you know what? The $700 million local community bank that shows up at your local chamber of commerce, and the banker themselves show up, is also an amazing opportunity when you're looking at relationships to be able to provide for not only your own financial support for your businesses, but also for others. B&I chapter, local real estate groups. I'll give you one example. I went to a Jesuit all-boys school, and for high school. There's a large, you did too? Well, maybe that's why we're up here today. But I mention that because I don't still strut around wearing my 30-year-old high school Letterman jacket. However, we have a large network within that high school that is all lawyers, and it is an alumni lawyer society. And yesterday I was late to the gala because a young man who graduated from Northwestern Law School here in Chicago went through that service and said, does anybody know somebody in Chicago that I might be able to interview with? A month later, that young man took me 2 minutes. He was working at a place where I happen to know the managing partner of the firm, and he met it on his own merits. And he wanted to meet me last night to thank me. That young man reached out through one tiny sliver of an opportunity through his alumni society, and he's much closer to his graduation from high school than I am. And he got an opportunity that frankly changed his life, right? Changed his life. He got his first job here at a 50-lawyer plus firm. It took me 2 minutes. You don't know where the opportunities are going to come from, but you need to embrace them when they do. And the panel before had made a comment with respect to mentoring, that Desiree was talking about, and the ability to get 1 versus 2, and then 2 becomes 4. And there was an old Pert shampoo commercial in the early 80s that used to say, and so on, and like women's photos would come up on the screen and continue. That joke only works, by the way, in a group of older people. Like, there are no millennials under 30. But my point is that there is a changing landscape. And I think for us, dealing with the millennial changes that are coming about in our respective businesses, you need to know your partners extremely well. So you see what's coming when there's change on the horizon. And you need to take care of your own employees and your own staff and your own team, because there is no more expensive portion of any business than having to deal with unnecessary turnover with the people that you rely on a daily basis. So that, I think, is, at least as far as this go-around is concerned, would be my initial kind of comments to you. I do want to add a couple of stats that I was able to find with respect to women in the industry, so that we had 32.7% of all women worked in 1948. We fast forward now 70 years later, and that number is now 57%. I tell you, there's a perspective to be had. 57% is low, I'm sure, and we feel that way, and you should feel that way. But when you look at some perspective, at least the trend is headed in the right direction. So I encourage you all to take advantage of your local trade groups, the national opportunities, and expand amongst yourselves.
There were so many things that you brought up. I just went over my head and went through it. So you see how the conversation is. Oh, Johnson & Johnson. We all know who they are. They moved to Orange County last year. They bought Abbott Laboratories for $4 billion. They did $80 billion worth of book business. How many of you would like to be one of their vendor relations, right? Or communicate with them or be partner with them?
Everybody should.
Okay, right. Everyone should raise your hand. I sat next to him in a room, first time ever an event in Irvine for diversity inclusion by another company. There was 8 of us. I sat right next to him, didn't know who he was, for 3 hours, and later, I'm sitting in Michigan about 2.5 months ago. I get a phone call, and he says, Desiree, I'm having a passion mixer tomorrow back in Irvine, and I'd like you to come. I'm thinking, okay. The CFO is going to speak for 15 minutes. It's going to be 2.5 hours long. We're going to serve drinks and food, and I want you there. I was supposed to stay in Detroit for another 2 days. I said, sure, I'll come. He says, we're just going to network about passion. You know who was there? Every top person that that had gone to Penn State School as an alumni of 30 people for the next 2.5 hours. I'm not a Penn State alumni, but the passion of the work that they want to bring to the community of Orange County, because we're headquarters there, I'm inviting you. So sure enough, we changed my whole plan to went to it. You can imagine what happened out of that meeting, of the impact it went through, of Johnson & Johnson. Now we're besties. But my point is you never know where that's coming down the pipe, right? Johnson & Johnson's headquarters globally, in my backyard, and yet I travel around the nation, you know, that concept. And it was all about Penn State. Okay, I'm going to talk to you in this chapter, in this chapter. Oh, I got to refer you to so-and-so. I'm just like, oh. Mark.
Good afternoon, good morning. My name is Mark Ferguson. I'm not John Veal, I'm the other guy. I'm a deputy for Illinois, not the district director. And it's been an amazing conference. I've heard a lot of good stuff. And, give you a little background on myself. When I got out of grad school, I became a loan officer with a bank. After that, I said, banking's okay, but it's not exciting to me. So I went into mortgage banking and became the operations officer. And I said, that's okay, buying money for spot loans, things like that. That's okay, but then, the salespeople kept coming in and they were making 2-3 times more money than me. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I don't care if I do have a master's in finance, I can outsell these guys because I understand relationships, I understand valuing other people, I understand making them feel of value. Am I right, Tammy? And, just getting to know them, because any fool can communicate, but it's a real genius that connects. So I became an all-star salesperson, became one of the only black-owned and managed mortgage companies here in Illinois until I sold it. I went through, unfortunately, through a divorce, wound up with the SBA because I was Mr. Mom. Ironically, 30 years later, I'm now with the same woman that divorced me 30 years ago. And we now have 2 grandchildren, and we have a daughter. And, just to tell you, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen. That's what I'm saying. Each and every one of you. When you say it's done, then it's done. But if you never say that, you keep looking forward to the future, it's your playground. It's there. So for all of you, I've got a few tidbits. So can I give a little teaser about the SBA?
Please. I mean, I have this reputation that I get people to say things that they don't tell anyone else. So please keep going.
One of the tidbits that I want to give you is, how many of you are familiar with the SBA's CAP loan program? CAP loan program. You see, I'm not going to take anything from Freddie and Fannie and HUD and VA, but they're not the only ones that want to have some fun. It's just like Reggie Lewis said, why do white guys have to have all the fun, right? So why do these folks have to have all the fun? We have an amazing program. How many of you fancy yourselves as folks that like flipping property? We don't have any flippers? Oh, we got a few over here? Okay, well let me tell you this. We have a $5 million line of credit with a 5-year commitment with a 75% guarantee line to get lenders like U.S. Bank to do business with you, where you can take a piece of property and build it from the ground up, whether it's residential, mixed use, or commercial, and or if you want to rehab that piece of property, residential, mixed use, or straight commercial. And you can do that as many times as you want. You have a 5-year commitment. You do not have a sword of Damocles hanging over your head. Like with most commercial loans that bankers give you, you're always kind of wondering, man, my loan is up. You know, what am I going to do? We got to renegotiate? No, we don't play those games. But that's just a little teaser for all of you who are thinking about flipping properties, things like that. I do it on the side. I love it. I grew up, like I said, in financing. I've been a financier for 37 years. And don't let all this fool you. I'm 60 years old, so I've been around a little bit, but I have a lot of fun doing what I want to do. And believe it or not, just because we're the government doesn't mean that we are not here to serve you, because with us serving you, we get that tenfold back. So that's my unsolicited commercial for the United States Small Business Administration.
So think about this. How many firsts can you say at this conference has happened that you don't know of resources, hence the word report, the ecosystem, to grow your book of business and most importantly, your human relations on the impact of what we can do within this room, right? That's incredible because we all want to have extra streams of income. And I keep telling everyone, as a woman or as a man, it doesn't matter, that we can own our own business. If you have your license, let's say, let's just take a breakdown to something really simple, that if you are a realtor, which I've been for the last 30 years, that if I didn't have my broker's license and own my own brokerage, that I could still own another business and still be a realtor. But as a realtor, I have to hang it under a brokerage license. But the idea is that I still am my own company when I file my taxes because I'm not 1099, okay? So here he is working at SBA.gov, and yet he's still utilizing the resources to do his auxiliary book of business, which is the same thing as an employee. And he also does not get paid on how many deals, but he gets a reputation. He gets the impact of what gets done because he has to fill out a grading report, I believe it's every month.
Performance report. Yeah.
That how many he's touched, how many he's served, and how much what the success rate is. They actually have an award for him that I won 2 years ago for the SBA Champion of the Year Award for women-owned businesses in 2016. And the idea is that they get accolades on how well you succeed. So they'll have a Rolodex of zillions, but they'll work with you every week for free to make you better. So the partnership of the success story I want to share real quick. In Dallas, I met a $30,000 handyman who partnered up with the SBA. She was a contracting officer for a major DoD contracting company. Within 1 year, he got a $30 million contract. She wrote it for him. Why? Because that was her job, what she wanted to help this person. And she knew exactly what they would need to see because she was the one who was approving hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts every year, in fact, in the billions. Wow, right? So the partnership here is about that. Please, go ahead.
What I was going to say too, collaboration, communication, and cooperation is real big with the SBA, so we partner with just about anyone. And I would like to say for all the ladies out here, all of you are minorities. We have a special contracting program. How many of you know that the United States government spends $550 billion a year for goods and services? Raise your hand. How many of you have dreamed about contracting and getting a contract for that? Whatever the endeavor may be, it may be building new barracks for, say, Great Lakes Naval Base, what have you. You know, your imagination will take you wherever you need to go, but we have the tools that are necessary for the SBA. A lot of people say, well, Mark, so what, $550 billion, what does that mean to me? Well, you know, I didn't mention that 23% of that is set aside for small businesses. And at least 4% of that is set aside for women-owned businesses. So if you say, who moved my cheese? You probably never knew what your cheese was in the first place, okay? Because I'm telling you, it's there. It's there, but you have to have the intestinal fortitude to go tap into it.
We have the Airport Minority Diversity Council that's going to be here. We have so many during a roundtable this afternoon to exactly that. They actually think, oh, I don't want to work at an airport. Do any of you negotiate? Do any of you consult? Right? Big money. $88,000 to $2 million in 1 year for a person who did grass cutting.
You get healthy real quick.
That's right.
You get real fat too.
So we could go on this all day, the excitement, right? So, Sarah, what are the most common issues and concerns that you deal with in your field? I mean, you're a lawyer. Whoa, that's a heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned the thing that I'm most focused on in terms of change in the industry, which is you know, the California law impacts us, it impacts our counterparty, it obviously impacts consumers. So I think that to me is just huge. But day to day, because of the role that I'm in, I'm looking at everything from our counterparty relationships, whether it's technically our legal relationship with them as well as how we're treating each other because we're trying to improve the relationship, to how consumer regulations impact us and our counterparties, because we build a lot of tools that our counterparties have the opportunity to use. We want to make sure that those tools are legal, not just if we're using them precisely, but also for our customers, and that's a huge aspect of what we do. And we also manage low-level litigation. So I'm dealing with nearly any aspect you can think of. There's not, the reason I decided to focus on the California Consumer Privacy Act is because that is a huge change in terms of what we're focused on as opposed to the myriad of issues that I deal with every day. But I touch everything from deals to enforcement actions to regulatory, all the way through litigation. So it's really, it's a garden of opportunity.
A garden of opportunity, right? Stress, you got 30 minutes to get an answer out to the court. But also, you got it from top, bottom, and all sides. I mean, the administration's changed, the rules changed, CFPB is going to be here today, not tomorrow, GSCs are going to be here today, not tomorrow. You're not going to have a job, yes you are. You have personal life, you've got, all that. That's just, to be so calm, cool, and collect, and you sit on the council, what's your secret sauce that keeps you so composed? I mean, she's been sitting here for 3 days, right? Running all this, and you're going, okay.
It's a good question. I will tell you, I am definitely an A personality by nature. But that's not always the best thing for a lawyer, although many lawyers are A personalities. And what I will say is, one of the people I worked with at Bank of America, which was my job prior to Fannie Mae, and he's in charge of all the regulatory inquiries, including from the SEC on the broker-dealer side. So you can imagine he has a huge job, and it is always pants on fire. And he is the most calm, cool, collected person that I know. Never seems to break a sweat. And one thing I learned from him was there needs to be a calm force in the room. Because sometimes you're the only one, and it's really great if the lawyer's not stressed out and seeming stressed out. Because if a lawyer seems stressed out, there's something wrong. You did something wrong, or they're trying to protect you from doing something. It was something I learned to do. I would say the other thing is, and I think we've talked about this here at the conference, is you have to figure out, Tammy talked about it, the whole balance of your life. And you have to make sure you're exercising and eating right at least most of the time, and still having fun. You have to take vacations, connect with your network, and figure out what works for you. I'm enough of an introvert. I need my downtime by myself, and I do a lot of reading. I love to cook, and you just have to figure out what works for you so that you can balance. And every day, and I'm not as organized as Tammy with 120 seconds in the morning, 120 seconds in the evening, but I will say what I try to do every day is figure out what is most important today It may be a work issue, it might be a home issue, it might be a friend who needs you, whatever it is, you do have to prioritize. Like for me, it is prioritizing every day of what is my focus. And that's what really helps get me to the next level. But I love the idea of at night sort of writing down, like, oh gee, I have a friend who's going through something. Let me not forget to reach out to her or him in the morning. I like that idea of sort of adding to my docket in terms of being there for people, because I think that's just one of the most important things that we can do. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's...
No, it does. It means people got to see inside you. That's the whole purpose there. But I want... Alex.
9 years ago, I started my firm when my wife was pregnant with our second. And as I remember, as I told her, and I was the managing partner of a medium-sized firm at the time, and I told her that the reason I was doing it was because she'd stopped working. And at the minute that we gave birth, or actually I probably shouldn't say we, if she was here, she'd stand up and say, you didn't give birth to anything.
She's right.
She's 100% right. So it's probably good she didn't come. And so there was, and I told my partners at the time, they weren't married, they didn't have any children. So they also were lacking perspective. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to end up paying for therapy 20 years from now for one of these kids laying on a couch because daddy wasn't around. So we made a conscious decision to do that. So over the course of the last 8 years and growing the business and having a lot of women that now work with us, when we're looking at the impacts of certain things, I rely a lot on our team members to provide me with that yin and yang to the answers that otherwise as lawyers we oftentimes believe we're always right. Another reason why I'm glad my wife isn't here. And the other side of that equation is, I'm in Florida. Florida's an anomaly. Somebody said earlier today that when you look at the real estate industry and you look at tidal wave and it starts on the west coast and makes its way east and you need to study the west, I would tell you that when it gets to Florida, it either stops completely or something changes it. But our state is very different. And it's different in positive ways and also some negative ways, like all the states are. But Florida is an anomaly, and I think along with California, and it's now 1 and 2, it's definitely in the top 3 as far as the states that have a lot of changes that impact, whether high taxes over there or no taxes on my end. Those are reasons that either promote people leaving or potentially bring people in. And in the South Florida market on its own, that has over 3.5 million people, we're very different. And I would tell you that that also provides us with some perspective, because we have so many people from so many places and so many cultures that come in and bring in the ways in which they do business in other places, and not always the best. Whether it's Colombian, Panamanian, Mexican, everything from south of Texas to Russians that were buying properties there for a long time. Miami is an area that somehow a lot of times gets propped up financially by buyers that aren't necessarily intending to be there forever. We have a different market. Actually, I think there was I'm going to use the word young, so I think she made a reference to the fact her daughter was 28. You shouldn't believe it. There was a Colombian woman, I think, that was up here earlier. Colombia is currently the foreign country that does the most amount of web searches for Miami real estate. And that's according to the Miami Association of Realtors. So when you dive into certain things to realize where things are coming from, that's a big deal. And how many people here have heard of the FinCEN GTOs? Or the FinCEN so nobody, probably because, and you will soon, FinCEN geographical targeting orders were issued for South Florida and for the Manhattan area, which basically required us as lawyers and title companies closing properties to report to the federal government any transactions that we were closing that were $1 million or more, that were all cash and under what were corporations. In other words, trying to make sure that we were no longer facilitating through the real estate market the laundering of potential illicit money from foreigners. And I'll tell you, living in Miami, with no offense to anybody who's from anywhere I'm about to say, but if you are from Argentina, or you are from Venezuela, or you are from Colombia, or you are from Mexico, or you are from Panama, a lot of those countries have current government issues and crises that require a lot of times for people to escape with their monies and anything they can, and purchasing real estate in America became a hotbed for a lot of foreigners to be able to do that. Just earlier this morning, I read that Marco Rubio, our Florida State Senator and a failed presidential candidate, is actually the lead supporter now for taking the FinCEN geographical targeting orders and actually making them nationwide. So I want to make sure we understand that. That means that not just in South Florida now, but also and in Manhattan areas, which were specifically targeted for that. But there is now a rising sentiment to make sure that anywhere across the country, if you purchase a property all cash and $1 million or more through a shell corporation, that you are going to have to disclose who your buyer is. Now, obviously, we can all sit here for a second and think and say, well, why the heck wouldn't you want to do that? If you're not up to any illicit or illegal activities, you shouldn't have a problem. And that's obviously on the other end combated as a lawyer by saying, I don't care if I'm doing nothing illegal. I shouldn't have to tell you who I am. Walt Disney purchased all of the land that is now Disney World under private land trust, so nobody knew that he was accumulating property, so that the guy over there wouldn't sell for more because he knew he had just bought the 1,000 acres next door. There are reasons why. So you get into those issues and you look into it, and your markets and every market is different. But I encourage all of you to use the resources, and on my end in particular, I think if there's any questions that I can offer and respond that may have to do with legal ramifications, every one of our industries is undergoing some significant changes, and we need to be aware of it. And in that sense, the internet is both the evil and the good, because a lot of the reasons that things are changing is because of that, but it's also an enormous access to unfettered information that we didn't have before.
So, Mark, you deal with a lot of, we talked about 5 million. Let's break it down to, I want to hire an assistant. I need to go buy, Alexa would be the next AI for, to have an automated system. But, what's the cheaper? Obviously, hiring a part-time person. So, you guys do microloans to really offset the help. And most people don't realize that you can actually get a loan through the SBA for $5,000 to scale that up. Talk to us about that and what was some of the issues of doing that through the company.
Well, there are no issues about doing it through the company. I mean, a microloan is simply that, $5,000 to $50,000. It's relatively easy to do. Here in Illinois, we have Axiom, CNI, or CBI, I should say, a couple other micro lenders. But what makes that great about getting a micro loan is a lot of time these are mission-based lenders who are sanctioned, much like certified development financial institutes. And their underwriting standards aren't quite as stringent if you went through a money center bank or a community bank. And what makes it great is like you take somebody like Axiom. If you want to go into business and let's just say you want to get this extra equipment for your business, what have you, and they say, well, today's technology is tomorrow's junk. Because, there's somebody down in 1871 that's going to have an idea that's going to make that obsolete in less than 24 hours, okay? But people like Axiom will go ahead and consider taking that third car that you have, that your teenager just got in an accident in, and that it's getting fixed up, and use that as collateral. They'll be doing the unconventional and try to secure the loan the best way that they can. And it is by all means a very quick way of getting your hands on monies for $5 grand, 10 grand, whatever the case may be, as opposed to going through a full-blown SBA process, which through the Express program is a lot easier, but you don't have to go through the stringent underwriting of a bank. You'll go through their underwriting, and then what I'm trying to tell you, Desiree, more so than ever, is that with mission-based lenders, their underwriting criteria is not as stringent. If you know your 5 C's of credit, if you're lacking a C or 2, you probably don't want to go to a bank. You probably want to go to a micro lender, and they'll be able to help you a little better. So if you're lacking collateral, or conditions aren't correct, or maybe you got that little blurb on your credit report from way back when, okay, that can haunt you. Because here's a fallacy. There's something that all of you need to take to heart. You cannot have jacked up credit personally, okay, and say, we're going to make a loan to the business. No, you are tied to the hip with your business. That's why they have something called a personal guarantee, okay? Now, if your personal guarantee isn't worth whatever, man, how are you going to get the loan for your business? A lot of people believe, Mark, my personal credit, it's kind of shaky, but my company is stellar. It can walk with the best of them. And I'm like, okay, so what? You need to go clean up your personal credit. So the other thing is, too, even if you're going to go get a micro loan and it's with a mission-based lender, look, if you know you have an issue, take care of it. Procrastination is a habit of the poor. You're going to wait, and you're going to wait, and when you really need it, it's going to blow up in your face, and you have no one to blame but you. And I'm just telling you the truth, folks. 37 years of lending, from housing, from doing VAs and FHAs, standing out here when they used to have projects, with people moving them into affordable housing, to multi-million-dollar deals for major corporations. I'm telling you the truth. It's for everyone. Doesn't matter. You can be little, you can be huge. The standard is still the same. And if you don't believe me, ask any banker, and they'll tell you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, please. So how many micro lenders are out there?
Oh, there are quite a few micro. Here in the state of Illinois, I believe we have 3 or 4. I'd have to check with Phyllis at the table.
I think it's, well, I was told last time at the headquarters it was 150. So my issue was that there's not a lot of them.
Oh, no, there's not a lot of them because, well, there's not a whole lot of money to be made with that.
Right.
See,
That was
for
the
us,
issue I was
yeah,
focusing
okay,
on.
yes, for us to be, SBA, despite the fact that, the alternative small business parameters are $5 million net income, $30 million net worth, that's not a small company to me. I'm used to dealing with mom and pop type organizations, and that's what the microloan is for, is to build up some of the underserved communities so we can go ahead and raise the quality of life for everybody in the community, create more jobs. Like, for example, right now we have an issue with our suburbs where the Lincoln Mall just fell. That's because a lot of the big box stores have moved out or are going out of business. So what are they going to do out there in the south suburbs to promote their economy? They're coming to us so we can go ahead and help them create more small businesses. Small businesses are the backbone to the economy, but a lot of people don't realize that. We just think that you gotta be P&G and you gotta be this person or this company to be a success. No, each and every one of you that are in business for yourself are contributing to the economy, but yet still you're also developing other folks, many yous or many me's, to help promote that within the community, and that's how we do economic development together. Like when the tide rolls in, whether you're in a dinghy or you're in a battleship or an aircraft carrier, they're all going to still rise to the top, and that's what we got to kind of remember.
Excellent. Well, that's one of the reasons that we've been working for the last couple of years and trying to get states to incorporate programs to incentivize small businesses and not big companies. Because if a big company comes into a rural area like we heard yesterday, it decimates it. But if we all work on having the small businesses that we hear day in and day out that are driving the economy, then incentivize the small business to go to that state or stay in that state. Retention.
Right.
It should not be just an individual, it should be a company too within that state. So, moving on to the next question. The question was paraphrased as consumers to make sure the resources are being managed responsibly by financial institutions. Let's change that up. Let's change it to where it's responsible, whether you're a B2B customer or a B2C customer, that how can they engage to base on your organization that you feel would drive a better synergy to the products and services that your organization and or company deal on a daily basis. I think is the best way to want to paraphrase it, because here we are at Fannie, you don't just deal with the consumers, you also deal with businesses and businesses. So let's open it up to both segments and not just one.
Well, I think it's a great question. It's also fairly broad sweeping given our footprint, I would say. But I mean, just in the single family space alone, we deal with about 1,800 lenders. So right there, and it's everything from small community banks and HFAs all the way through the biggest banks in the country and everything in between. And that's just lenders and servicers. We also have the investor community.